Months had passed since the day Arin met the little dwarf and the forest's magic saved a village girl. Life had returned to peace, the birds sang again, laughter filled the air, and Arin felt proud that kindness still lived in his world. He often looked toward the forest, wondering if the dwarf was still out there, among the glowing trees and sparkling streams. Everything felt calm, almost too calm. That morning, as Arin fetched water by the stream, something stirred in the distance. A faint shimmer rose above the forest, soft at first, then brighter, like sunlight caught in motion. Butterflies, golden and glowing, drifted toward him, swirling in the air like living light. One landed gently on his hand, and before he could breathe, a glowing symbol appeared, the same mark he'd once seen on the dwarf's herbs. It was a call, a silent message from the forest. Deep within the forest, the little dwarf tried once more to heal the fading land. He pressed his glowing hands against the earth, but the light flickered and vanished, like a candle in the wind. With worry in his heart, the dwarf lifted his staff and sent one final spark of light, a message, carried by the wind, straight to Arin. Arin knew that light. It wasn't just a glow, it was a plea. The dwarf needed him. Without a second thought, he packed a few things, said goodbye to the villagers, and turned toward the fading horizon. The path to the forest looked different, now less alive, quieter, almost scared. But deep down, Arin felt the same courage that once led him there before. He whispered softly, "Hold on, my friend, I'm coming back." As Arin stepped into the clearing, a familiar figure turned. The dwarf, his old friend. For a heartbeat, time froze, then Arin smiled, eyes glistening. "You're safe," he said, his voice trembling with relief. The dwarf chuckled softly. "I could say the same about you, lad." But behind his gentle smile, worry clouded his eyes. Arin noticed it instantly. "Something's wrong, isn't it?" The dwarf nodded slowly, glancing at the trees around them. "The forest is fading, Arin. Its heart is hurting. Someone's been taking what doesn't belong here." Arin's smile faded. "The merchant," he whispered, and the dwarf's silence was all the answer he needed. In that moonlit clearing, friendship turned into a vow to save the forest that once brought them together. They walked in silence, each step cracked against roots that once shimmered with life. Arin's eyes widened, the ground was dry, the air heavy with ash. "What happened here?" he whispered. The dwarf knelt beside a broken stump, brushing away soil. "See this?" he said softly. "They cut through the roots that feed the heartstreams. The merchant's men must have come again." Arin touched the withered bark, faint sparks of light flickered, dying almost instantly. "They took everything," he said, voice low. "Even the magic that lived in these herbs." The dwarf nodded. "The creatures have fled. The forest's balance is broken, but maybe not lost." He looked up at Arin. "If we can find where he stores what he stole, maybe we can heal it." Arin's jaw tightened. "Then we find him." And with that, the two friends set off deeper into the forest, where the silence grew thicker, and something watched them from the shadows. The forest had fallen silent. Only the faint crackle of lanterns broke the dark. Arin's breath slowed as he peered from behind the roots, his heart pounding. Beside him, the dwarf's eyes burned with quiet fury. They finally saw it. The stolen treasures of the forest, crystals, herbs, even the sacred wood of the whispering tree. And in the middle of it all, a greedy merchant, counting his gold, unaware that the forest was watching him back. The merchant's eyes widened in panic. He had been caught, his greed exposed. Clutching his gold, he leapt onto his cart, shouting at his horse as it tore through the forest path. Behind him, Arin and the dwarf gave chase, hearts pounding, feet striking the roots of a forest that seemed alive again. The lantern's glow flickered wildly, throwing broken light across the trees, as if the forest itself was watching. The merchant's greed had led him deep into the forest's heart. Each stolen step carried him closer to the path. He was never meant to take the swamp path. His hunger for gold blinded him, and soon his cart sank into the bog. As he pulled at the sinking cart, the ground beneath him began to breathe, thick roots twisting like hands. Arin and the dwarf watched in silence as the swamp claimed what it was owed. No anger, no revenge, just balance restored. Arin and the dwarf stood in silence as the last ripples faded, only gold sinking into silence. The forest seemed to breathe again, not with rage, but with relief. Vines wrapped gently around the stolen goods, returning them to the soil. The herbs began to regrow, tiny lights flickering like forgiveness. A quiet hum rippled across the forest floor, balance restored, peace reclaimed. And then, the forest breathed once more. Golden butterflies danced where darkness once lingered. Streams shimmered. Flowers bloomed in colors no painter could ever dream of. From behind the trees came the gentle footsteps of old friends, the same magical creatures that once vanished. The dwarf smiled through tears, his heart lighter than ever. Arin closed his eyes, feeling the warmth of sunlight return. The forest was alive again. The dwarf's eyes glistened as he looked at Arin. "You brought the forest back to life, because you believed." Arin smiled softly, his gaze lifting toward the glowing trees. "I just followed what felt right." Golden butterflies floated between them, gentle, like the forest's blessing. The dwarf placed his hand on Arin's shoulder. "Promise me you'll protect its secret." "I promise," Arin said, voice firm yet full of warmth. As they parted ways, the light grew stronger, wrapping them in hues of gold and peace. And for the first time in years, the forest sang again, not in sorrow, but in joy. As the first rays of dawn painted the forest in gold, Arin walked toward the village, his heart both heavy and full. Behind him, the dwarf stood beneath the glowing trees, his kind eyes glimmering with pride. "Go on, lad," the dwarf called softly, his voice echoing like an old song through the woods. "The stream has chosen well." Arin turned once, smiled faintly, and raised his hand in farewell. Golden butterflies rose between them, swirling in the golden air like tiny blessings from the forest itself. And as Arin disappeared down the sunlit path, the dwarf whispered to the wind, "May his courage light the world, just as he lit ours." The forest shimmered once more, then grew quiet, as if holding that moment forever.